Hello, all. Good afternoon. Welcome to this 2 week refresher course, which we now call it as Faculty Development Program in Social Sciences and Humanities. Today, we are going to discuss in detail about systematic literature review and meta analysis. I'm Dr. Anamika and currently associated with Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, what we are going to learn today would be about the systematic literature reviews, what they are, what is the basic difference between the literature reviews we usually conduct and between systematic literature reviews, what is the relevance of systematic reviews, steps of systematic reviews, what is meta-analysis, and key takeaways along with few examples in social sciences of these systematic literature reviews. So what are systematic reviews? We are going to discuss that in detail. So traditionally in education, reviewing the literature and doing the research has been viewed as distinct activities. But actually, if we go in more detail, we'll find that both these things or both these terminologies are basically designed to find something. In review of literature, we find which has already been done. So reviews to find out what is already known from pre-existing research about a phenomena, about a subject or a topic. New primary research is conducted to provide answers to questions about which existing research does not provide clear or complete answers. So how we conduct a review of research is very important. In any research field, it is crucial to embed a research topic into a broader framework of research areas in a scholarly discipline to build upon the body of the knowledge in the area and to identify the gaps in the literature to provide the rationale for the research question under investigation. So where we see that there are a number of steps where literature review or review helps us. So first, the framework of research area to build the knowledge in that area. So here, literature reviews help us to build the knowledge of that particular area. The second point is where we can identify the gaps in the literature. So again, a literature review is mandatory to find the gap between the literature so that the future aspects of the research can be designed. So all researchers have to familiarize themselves with the existing body of literature on a given topic. And conducting a systematic review provides an excellent opportunity for this endeavor. And we'll see how this happens. So in a systematic review, a high-level analysis of primary research is performed. What happens in systematic reviews, a specific research question is developed before starting anything. And primary research is performed on this specific research question in which original research data is identified, selected, evaluated, and synthesized. And the primary purpose of the literature review is to provide a comprehensive summary of scholarly literature related to a particular research topic or a question. A systematic review is usually written by an expert panel after a thorough analysis of all published and unpublished studies. In contrast to traditional or narrative literature reviews that are criticized as being biased and arbitrary, the aim of systematic review is to carry out a review that is rigorous and transparent in each step of review process to make it reproducible and unupdatable. For example, if we see that in normal literature review, what happens that we type a topic, for example, if we want to understand about how education has been affected by COVID or how technology has changed the teaching paradigm. So what we'll do, we'll type these 4 5 words or a phrase into Google, and then search for the literature which has already been published. So we'll go through it one by one and select few points which are very relevant to our query, and then we'll update our knowledge accordingly. But what happens in a systematic review? In systematic review, first we draft a question, specific research question. It is not that broad. So we have to narrow it down to understand that, for example, if we are dealing with education, we'll continue with the same example where we can compare through a systematic review that what was the impact of technology on education compared to the times when the technology was not to that extent into education sector. So in this case, we have specific things in our mind where we are targeting about technology, we are targeting the education, and we are focusing on the comparison between the two in education. So there are few things which guide us the process and the further steps of systematic reviews. And rather than looking at any study in isolation through systematic reviews, we need to look at the body of evidence. So what all has been published till date. So what literature has been available, what kind of studies has been done. So that might be case reports, or that might be a case series, or might be possible that some randomized control trials have already been done in this area. So we need to collate all that into one document where we can actually interpret. So what happens generally that uh, these studies have opposite results. They might not be on the same lines as we were expecting, or some might be on the positive end, or some might be on the negative end, but which makes us confused about the conclusion of the questions we have in our mind. So, what we do in normal literature review, we just summarize few of these studies and which might create a bias. So that if I am saying that my mind says that technology really improved the education system. So it has penetrated well. The audience have taken it very well, and they are reaching to the right level. So what will happen? So from in the literature review, I'll pick and choose. I'll choose only those studies which are in line with my mindset or which are in line with my thoughts. So that would create a bias, and I'll leave or I'll not choose those studies which are reporting the negative or the opposite of this. For example, in this case, some studies might have identified or surveyed some students where students are disagreeing to the statement that technology has improved their lives or education level, or they have decreased their well-being, they have technology has impacted their health or their family or something like that. But in a literature review, I have a chance that I'll not pick those negative studies, and I'll pick only those I want to. So that is a bias. But what happens in a systematic literature review? You have a specific research question, you have a well designed protocol where you will specify that I will include these type of studies which are discussing about technology and education, and um, whether it would be negative or positive, it doesn't matter in systematic literature review. Any studies which are discussing about your research question, it will be included in the systematic reviews, thus decreasing the chances of bias in your study results. So, as discussed that SLRs or meta-analysis studies are particularly collecting the data from different kind of studies, whichever it may be. It may be case series, the study results might have been published as case control studies or cohort or RCDs or any type of studies. It will be included in SLRs. So SLRs come as at the top level of the evidence pyramid. So what the evidence pyramid, the lowest is editorials and expert opinion. This is about, for example, in the same case, I'm saying that without any evidence, I'm just saying that in my point of view, technology has improved the penetration of education. But this is just an expert opinion. I don't have any data with me, or I have not conducted any study related to it. So it comes at the lowest level of evidence. So as we go up with increasing number of complexities of the studies we have conducted in that particular area, the level of evidence increases. And because that SLRs have included simple as well as complex studies into the literature review, so they comes at the highest level of evidence with a systematic manner. So systematic literature reviews and meta-analysis are seriously gaining their importance in today's world, as there are so much of data available. um, if you go on Google and type just one topic, you will get thousands of results, and compiling those results in a normal literature review is actually not possible, because of the uh, large number of studies. So systematic literature reviews and meta-analysis help you or guide you to reach to the conclusion or to find the actual answer of your question, because there are both positive and negative studies in literature review. You can't, even if you are non-biased, then also you can't come to the conclusion. So you have to actually compare those data side by side, including all the studies, and then come to a conclusion. So what are systematic literature reviews? Systematic literature reviews apply explicit methods to the task, such as comprehensive searching and quality assessment of the studies. It's not that all the studies are benchmarked same, or they are compared on the same platform. It's not like that. The quality assessments of all the studies, including in the systematic review, is assessed. So we have different checklists like NICE checklist. NICE is a UK authority which guides the UK pricing of drugs. So that provides a checklist for the studies to be included in the systematic reviews. So that's a different aspect. So there are good reasons for applying systematic review methods to view studies. So systematic review methodology is very well developed for trials, actually, for clinical trials related to drugs. But the debate about systematic approaches to reviewing non-experimental research is in early stages. So in social sciences also, because we conduct the trial, not the clinical trials, but other form of studies, including the observational studies, including the surveys, the cross-sectional studies. So we can apply the systematic approaches to that. But the debate is still going on the studies where it is non-experimental research. The contribution, in social sciences, we actually don't do much of non-experimental research. Non-experimental research, we mean that, for example, in languages, sometimes what happens that people pick up few novels and discuss about their pros and cons. It's kind of a book review. In these type of researches, actually systematic reviews have not been found very useful till date, but the debate is still continuing. The contribution that non-experimental and qualitative research can make to evidence-informed policy and practice has been limited in the past because of uncertainty about how we can include that. And I will show you. There are guidelines, PRISMA guidelines. I hope you all are able to see this. But there are guidelines which guide the um, which guide the systematic reviews and meta-analysis, how we conducted, what are the checklists after conducting a systematic review or doing a systematic review. There is a checklist where there are different aspects, that what was the title of the systematic review, have you completed the abstract, what is the introduction to be included, it includes rationale, objectives, the methodology of the systematic reviews should be ultra clear, which includes the eligibility criteria of the studies you are going to include, information sources, what are the sources you are going to use, the search strategy you are going to develop, the selection process you adopted, the data collection process, the data items, study risk of bias assessment. Have you conducted that bias assessment during the systematic review? Then effect my measures. What is the measure, the outcome measure you have considered to be included in your systematic review? Then how you synthesized your data is again important. But you tabulated it, you made some tables, or you made some graphs out of it, how you visually displayed your data. So that is again an important point. And have you assessed any kind of sensitivity analysis into it? And then reporting bias assessment. So reporting bias assessment is about the missing data. So why there was some missing data, how did you cover up that missing data, or have you described in your systematic review? And then certainty assessment is that confidence interval assessment, have you performed that on your data or not? And so it's actually Prisma is a 27-point checklist, which tells you, which asks you to mark each and every item of your systematic literature review so that it meets, or it is considered to be unbiased and meets your research question query. So that it can answer it in very unbiased form and a very clear form, that yes, your research question is this and your answer is this. If you have checked all these items that while conducting your systematic review. So this is the Prisma guideline. So moving further, we have a comparison between SLR and a literature review, a systematic literature review, or a literature review done through a systematic way, and a normal literature review. What we generally do using PubMed or Google, just type one or two keywords, and then whatever we find, we go through it one by one. So the comprehensive nature of a systematic review distinguishes it from traditional literature reviews, which typically examine a much smaller set of research evidence and present it from single author's perspective. See, for example, I am conducting a literature review. I type the same question what I had in my mind, that how technology has impacted education. So I typed few keywords in Google and found out some studies. So what I'll do, I'll probably screen the studies appearing on the first page, second page, or maximum to the third page of the Google. I probably will not go beyond it. And how much it is, like 20-30 publications I'll read, that's it. But this is not the case with the systematic literature reviews. Systematic literature reviews will guide you through particular search strategies. Those search strategies will be conducted in particular databases, and whatever the number of studies you will retrieve, you will screen all those. It may go up to 5,000 studies. So the screening methods we'll discuss in the coming slides, how we screen all those and what are the search strategy kind of thing. But yes, that's true. For some kind of studies or some kind of trials or the research question, there are so many publications. For example, we take the latest COVID example. If we try to study any of the topics related to COVID-19. So what we'll do, we'll develop a search strategy, run in a database, and I am sure we'll get more than 10,000 hits. There is so much of literature related to COVID that is available. So if we are conducting a systematic review on COVID or any particular topic related to coronavirus, we will have to screen a large number of publications. But while conducting a literature review, what I'll do, I'll just screen few tens or 15s out of them and then come to my conclusion. That's not right, actually, but this is how the literature review has been done so far. So systematic reviews are important because they help to minimize the bias that would result from cherry picking studies in a non-systematic way. This we just have discussed that pick and choose method in literature review is actually not helpful. So we'll have to have some selective studies which needs to be included, and to reach to those selective studies, a systematic method has to be adopted where particular steps needs to be undertaken and reach to those studies which are very relevant to our particular question. Unlike systematic reviews, literature reviews don't aim to produce an answer to a clinical question. In literature reviews, we just type that technology in education, but through systematic literature review, the first step is to develop a research question where we want to elaborately define what we want to understand. So we want to compare the traditional methods of education with technology, or we want to understand the impact of technology on families of educators, or we want to understand the impact of technology on not on families of educator only, but on the families of students as well, because it's both ways. Student has also impacted, and the educator has also been impacted a lot through this technology intervention in education nowadays. It may be a positive impact, it may be a negative impact. For example, in terms of technology, it has given you an option that you are still at home and looking at your family and still doing your research or still doing your education or still doing your teaching. So that has helped. But in the negative way, it has impacted because you're not meeting your peers or your colleagues. So it has increased depression level as well. So it's both ways. But we want to assess the overall impact of education on technology on education. So this is possible through systematic literature reviews. So literature reviews can provide a context or background information for a new piece of research. If we want to do something new, we are going to just have a background information on that. So in that case, literature reviews might help you. They can stand alone as a journal guide to what is already known about a particular topic. So they'll provide you an overview of the topic, but not a deep dive. So sort of synthesis in literature review does not attempt to control for author's own bias. So there is no scope where author's own bias can be controlled in literature reviews. So systematic reviews originated actually in biomedical field, but currently form the basis of decision making in evidence-based treatment, evidence-based behavior practices. So nowadays you might have heard evidence-based treatment. This is a very common term which is being used these days. So what is evidence-based treatment? So evidence-based treatment is that, for example, there are two treatments available for headache. It's a kind of um, diclofenac or and paracetamol. These are two different entities which are present nowadays, and both are effective for headache, for example. So what happens that there are multiple studies which are available for these two different treatments. But when you study both of them, both of these studies will say, oh yes, this is efficacious. Paracetamol studies will say this is very effective. The diclofenac study will say, oh, this is very effective. So um, how to differentiate between these two, or how to find out that which of them is best? So this is evidence-based treatment. So A systematic review is being conducted, a meta-analysis is being conducted where you get a numerical value of the different outcomes, where you can understand or conclude that yes, uh, paracetamol is effective in controlling headache in 20 minutes, diclofenac is controlling headache in 30 minutes, but paracetamol produces few side effects, diclofenac doesn't produce side. So this is just an example. So these conclusive statements uh, can come out of a systematic review and meta-analysis where you actually perform some statistical analysis to compare what has already been done in multiple studies. But now you want to come that you want to compare these two treatments and come to a single statement that which is better. For example, daily new treatments are coming up, be it coronavirus, be it Ebola, or be it any other or new antibiotic which is coming up in the market. So whatever it is, so how that take place? So how the researchers reach to a conclusion? Researchers reach to a conclusion through a clinical trial comparing drug A versus drug B, which is already in the market. Whereas policymakers, how policymakers reach to a decision that this treatment is better and should be approved for marketing or should come under their reimbursement list. So that is not possible without conducting a systematic review and meta-analysis to reach to a particular conclusion, right? So now we'll discuss in detail about the systematic review process, how this process takes place, what are the different steps which are being undertaken, how these steps are being done, and how we actually process the data we find through those different studies we have found. So the first step, as we discussed earlier as well, that the first step is to develop the research question. So that is the foremost step which needs to be undertaken. In systematic reviews, we develop a research question, and related to research question, what steps we need to do in a systematic review has to be documented in a document known as protocol, study protocol, or review protocol. So systematic reviews need to specify a research question and the methods that will be used to investigate the question. This is often written as a protocol prior to undertaking the review. So writing a protocol or plan of the method at the beginning of a review can be very useful activity. It helps the review team to gain a shared understanding of the scope of review and methods that they will use to answer the research question or reviews question. So what happens? See, I am one of the person who is starting to do a systematic review, but systematic review can never be done in isolation. So there needs to be a team which do the different steps of the systematic review. It's not one step review where you just type in Google and find some studies and just write down few points. That's not the case. Systematic review has different steps which needs to be undertaken. And to remove the bias, there are some steps which needs to be undertaken by 2 or 3 people. So there is a team. So I have developed a research question. I am clear cut about my research question, and I know that what methodology I am going to employ, but that all is in my mind. But I need to share that information, that the review methods, the review question with my team as well. So what I'll do, so to avoid any kind of confusion, a document called protocol is generated or is drafted, which has everything into it in a written format. So different types of systematic review will have more or less developed protocols. Every systematic review will have a protocol. The review question gives each review its particular structure and drives key decisions about what types of studies to include, where to look for them, how to assess their quality, and how to combine their findings. So every minute detail is being recorded in the protocol so that everybody can follow what needs to be done. Protocol specifies that what kind of studies we need, what kind of studies will answer my review question. I'll include only those. And what would be the databases or what would be the data sources where I could locate those studies. And next is, as we discussed earlier as well, quality of those studies is very important. So how I'll assess all those studies which I'll find from different bases. So that criteria is also defined in the protocol. And how to combine their findings, whether I'll be doing a qualitative review only where no analysis will be done. Would that be a comparison, a descriptive comparison of the studies? Or will it be a quantitative review which will have a meta-analysis or network meta-analysis, and how I will perform my network analysis, what kind of test I will or I'll employ to understand my data, and how I will report my findings. So all this is a part of protocol. So I'll show you some of the protocols. So this is a type of protocol where the question was smoking cessation interventions and strategies for hospitalized patients. So this was the question. So here are the main parts of the protocol. So one is see. We see that review questions. Here we are detailing about the specific questions we have in our mind that needs to be addressed through this systematic review. So this is the first part of the protocol. The second part is the inclusion criteria. Inclusion criteria includes everything we want to include. It tells you about the criteria for the participants. Participants, what do you understand by participants? Participants is the human subjects which are considered in these studies. For example, I am trying to understand, I'll keep the same example of education and technology. I want to assess the impact of technology and on education among children aged 10 to 15 years. If I have specified that I would need only 10 to 15 years as my human subjects on which I want to study, so then I will include the studies only those studies which I have assessed or which have considered only this age range, not the studies which have been conducted in adult teachers or adult students or maybe geriatric category of teaching community which has been affected a lot by technology intervention. So that's a different story. So here so we'll specify that what kind of participants should be there in the studies which I am going to include in my systematic review. So for example, in this case, if we are studying about the smoking cessation, so obviously the patients who are, or those human subjects who are habitual smokers or chain smokers would be included in our systematic review. Then what types of intervention? In our example, the type of intervention is smoking cessation. So we'll consider that type of intervention should have been studied in the studies we are going to include. In our case, what we are studying, we were studying about the technology and education. So those are the interventions. So we need to specify that in our systematic review inclusion criteria. So what is the outcome measure? So here in this example, they are studying about smoke reduction, withdrawal symptoms, weight gain, intervention specific side effects, and all those things. But what we will be going to study is impact on their um, probably on the negative side, impact on their eyesight or on their behavioral changes, or on the positive end, has their concentration level improved, or have their marks improved in examinations. So there might be different criterias we can decide upon when we are discussing about our research question, what kind of outcomes we are going to study. So then type of study, for example, I want to include studies of the highest level of evidence after SLRs. So that would be the randomized control trials. So I would try to include randomized control trials in my systematic reviews. But while doing my background search, I found that randomized control trials have not been yet done in my area of research question. Then I'll move to the next downer level or the lower level of assessment, where it was the cohort studies or observational studies, where I can choose that. If not that, then case reports or case series studies. So depending upon what kind of evidence is available in the literature, or I might include all type of studies, irrespective of the study design. Then it specifies that a search strategy protocol also has details about the search strategies, which are the databases I am going to identify, what would be the terms, what would be the bibliographic searching would be done, what would be, it might include the search timelines. For example, COVID is a very recent thing. So I'll restrict my searches from December 2019 to till date. I'll not go before that. What has been already, some minor research has been done for coronavirus, but I am not interested in understanding that aspect. So I'm dealing about the latest literature. So I would prefer to limit my search from December 2019 to uh, July 2021. So that's a just an example. I mean, that's a criteria where we can limit the search hits for screening, or that is the criteria where we would like to have only the latest information. We don't want to have the old information which is not relevant these days, right? So that is a way of doing that. And then critical appraisal, that is how we are going to appraise the study, how we are going to assess the quality of the study. For example, here they have given Sumari suit. It's a checklist which helps to assess the quality of the individual papers, their methodological validity, and the type of the study, have they reported everything or whatever it is. So a critical appraisal would be done, and how the data collection will take place. So all this process is being highlighted in the protocol. So this is just an example of one protocol. I can show you another protocol. So this is about education and training, the effectiveness of health professionals, education and training institutes. So this is being, again, the format would be more or less same, because the components included in the protocol will remain the same. The first is the objective of or the research question, which will guide through the next steps of the systematic review, where we are defined the PICO. PICO is basically, the PICO framework tells us about the population, the participants, the interventions, comparisons, if any, and the outcomes of the study. So the review question actually guides this PICO framework. So, and this PICO framework will further guide the search strategy we are going to involve. So this is an education-based systematic review. So the databases are like Eric Campbell Education Research Complete or something like that. If it is a health, we can have included PubMed, EBSCO, Sinhal, or related to that. So there are different databases where different kind of studies have been indexed, And to find your study of particular interest, you have to find the database where the topic falls in, so that you can find the most relevant studies including into it. So it's not, Google is not a database actually to search for anything systematically. So sometimes if we get less data, then we do some hand searching as well. For example, there are some cases which are not published data or indexed in any particular website or any database. So we need to find them through a cross-referencing, bibliographic checking, or the reviews which has already been done in the same area. So these are reference searching. These are come under hand searching. For example, conference abstracts. So some of the latest conference abstracts are not published. They are just available with the conference people. So you have to search for them, you have to consult, you have to contact the organizers to find those abstracts, and then search out the relevant subjects for your topic or your research question. So the basic structure of the protocol remains the same: eligibility criteria regarding the studies, regarding the participants, regarding the type of intervention you are going to include, type of outcome measures, what is the exclusion criteria. So this is again an important thing. You have to define which kind of studies you are not going to include in your systematic review. For example, as we discussed, that we need to keep an age criteria of okay, we need to keep an age criteria of 10 to 15 years. So we need to define that our exclusion criteria will be those studies which are assessing the population below 10 years or above 15 years. So that is again an exclusion criteria. Another thing is, for example, we are studying the assessment of technology on education. If any of the studies which are not studying the impact of technology on education, but they are studying the impact of technology on motor factories, or what should I say, printing industries or something like that. For example, I'm just giving you a vague example. Then we have to specify that these are the exclusion criteria of our systematic reviews. We are not going to include such kind of studies. And then how we are going to assess the biasness, how we'll do data extraction, so how we'll disseminate our findings. So all this is a part of a protocol. So this is the first document which is created or drafted in a systematic review, which holds a very important level, because it will summarize each and everything which we are going to do in next 4 to 6 months while conducting a systematic review, which is a long process. Then we'll have a selection criteria, as we just discussed, that there are different selection criteria which will guide you to go further. So reviewers have to make decisions about which research studies to include in their review. In order to do this systematically and transparently, they develop rules about which studies can be selected in the review. This we just discussed, that there are some guidelines, or there are some specific points where you specify well in advance that which studies or which kind of papers you are going to include in your systematic reviews. So selection criteria, sometimes referred to as inclusion and exclusion criteria, which was discussed, they create a restrictions on the review. They create a restrictions in such a manner that you come up, or the hits that come up through searching are very selective to your research question. They are not very broad, but they have already narrowed down because we have applied a selection criteria on that. So all reviews, whether systematic or not, limit in some way the studies that are considered by the review. For example, if we are talking about COVID-19, if I type only COVID-19, then there are millions of paper which will appear, but I can't screen those millions paper, and all those million papers can't provide me the answer of my research question. I have to be specific. So I have to specify what kind of studies I want to include. For COVID-19, for example, I need to understand only the clinical trials. So I'll include only the studies which are reporting the clinical data of COVID-19 related interventions. So the second thing is that I want to study only the effect of these interventions on geriatric patients, on the old age patients, patients aged 60 above. So I'll specify that in my inclusion criteria. So there is a funneling of the studies. There is a restriction that I have put on. I need COVID-19 is one, that is a broad term. The second thing I did was I need only studies which are assessing the clinical trial data, which are reporting only the clinical trial data. So I'll consider that as a second step of restriction. The third step would be I need only the geriatric patients. So that is a third step. So fourth step might be that I don't need any study which has studied about HCQ, for example. So I'll exclude those studies which have assessed any form of HCQ. So that is a form of funneling down and reaching to a um, reaching to the studies which are very pertinent to my research question. So systematic reviews simply make these restrictions transparent and therefore consistent across studies. These selection criteria are shaped by the review question and conceptual framework.